Episode 22. Old romantics never die. It used to be a land of philosophers, poets, and hopeless romantics. Not that I am sure there's any other sort. It was a group of small dysfunctional principalities and dukedoms which only became a country 150 years ago. Nice people, the Germans, but at that time they couldn't organize a piss-up in a brewery. While Britain was ruling its vast empire with ruthless efficiency, the Germans were arguing amongst themselves about the different types of being, and trying to conjure up the essence of a trout stream using only a piano and a plummy baritone. And all this thinking and dreaming was sustained by an agriculture system which was, and still is, one of the most spectacularly inefficient in Europe. How quickly people can change. Just a handful of years after German unification, national stereotypes had settled into a more familiar pattern. Germany had wrested the reputation for organized military aggression off the British, who in turn settled into their new role of backward-looking jingoists with a sense of entitlement. The Germans, however, have been forced to move on. The military dictatorship thing didn't go too well, and the current liberal, green, conservative mishmash is definitely a better look, although friends of the country like me wish they wouldn't take everything to extremes. What Germans have now is a weird sort of fundamentalist moderation, so middle of the road that they practically have white stripes painted down their backs. Their belief in infrastructure is wholly admirable and almost makes up for their complete lack of common sense. Of course, such sweeping generalizations are unfair and reprehensible. Talking about 80 million people in those terms is little short of racism. Germans do indeed have common sense, and who are we to judge them if they choose not to use it? If you think I'm exaggerating, just take a look out of the plane window. What do you see? Just fields, right? If we were flying over rural England, we would see large pastures divided by stone walls or hedgerows. Arable fields would be even bigger, leaving plenty of room for combine harvesters to strop their stuff, or rather that is what we would see when flying over England if the clouds ever deigned to part for a minute. The West German countryside in mid-April 1989 looks very different. Sorry, did I forget to tell you we are time-traveling again? Don't worry. We will have a much more comfortable experience than we did in Russia 20 years earlier. 1989 is a momentous year for Germany and for the rest of Europe, although the choice of month may be a little surprising. Anyway, back to the fields. Thanks to its arcane inheritance laws, most German farmland is split up between heirs on what is practically a field-by-field basis, meaning that, over the generations, farmers have inherited a narrow strip of land here, another there, and so on ad nauseam. There's no room for sophisticated machinery when your crops are spread across several miles, a few measly rows at a time. There's also no point in living in a farmhouse in the middle of your fields when most of them are not your fields. So the farmers live in villages, which have grown over the years into quaint but thriving rural hubs, and thanks to the Germans' admirable adherence to organic principles, pretty smelly hobs at that. A stroll through a typical German village will take you past surprisingly ornate farmhouses, each with its own capacious dung pile, a sort of slurry with a fringe on top. The word mist conjures up to German speakers not only the animal waste itself, but the noble life of the typical farmer. To the manure born. So when you look out of your aircraft window, I hope you don't just see a jumble of strips and strands, looking like a particularly unsuccessful game of Jenga. I am looking forward to going back to Berlin. It's my favorite foreign city. I am confident you will share my love for Berlin and all things German. Well, maybe not everything, but the odd blemish only serves to make the picture even more interesting. Of course, I'm biased, and speaking the language as I could in the 80s, before teaching eroded my linguistic skills, and confidence is the best way to get to know a country, and a lifetime's experience has taught me that the Germans are remarkably like us Brits. I hope you don't mind tagging along with my sixth formers. Before the end of the century, there is no other way I can spare the time or the money for a trip like this. Even so, it will take up some of my Easter holidays, but it's nice to be with young people who want to learn. All 7 of them have been with me before on exchange in Germany when they were only 14 years old, spending nearly 2 weeks as guests in a German family and school. In fact, they were there in the year of Dieselgate. As a welcome, our generous hosts invited us to a lovely meal in a local hostelry. The families really pushed the boat out with this icebreaker, if you pardon the nautical mixed metaphors. It was all going swimmingly until the waitresses started bringing out half-litre glasses of the local beer. This caused a great deal of merriment, as they were each carrying 12 large glasses. It's a typically German skill and did not, despite one English boy's whispered remarks, have anything to do with inbreeding, and only then did it strike me that some of the kids were asking for beer too. A good use of the target language, it is true. Although beer is not the most challenging item of German vocabulary, it was also a good way of getting me the sack. I then had a difficult discussion with my German opposite number. To his great credit, he didn't take offense. He arranged for the kids' beers to be replaced by diesel, another German word which scarcely taxed my pupils' translation skills. I was relieved to see litre glasses of fizzy black liquid appear in front of the children, although I had some misgivings that a few might agree with the girl who had told me on the journey over that Coca-Cola makes her hyper. I could hardly raise the topic again, and the rest of the evening went very well. It was only once my German colleague was driving me home that I dared broach the subject again. My curiosity got the better of me, and I asked the obvious question, "What is diesel?" He chuckled and said, "Half cola, half beer," and I was possibly in loco parentis with the emphasis on the loco. Fortunately for me, my pupils and their parents had more common sense than our head teacher would have had if someone had complained. Believe it or not, 7 is a good number for an A-level German class, and I had no problem recruiting them for this 3-day study trip to Berlin. There's plenty of room in the hotel, and once again, you are my guests. I'm afraid the itinerary is fixed to match the requirements of my students, but you're more than welcome to come with us for the bits that interest you. Day 1 will be pretty damn good, if I say so myself. A walking tour of the cultural sites of West Berlin. We come up against the border with the East, but this is only a tease for day 3. Today is a beautiful spring day, ideal for a stroll along the Kurfürstendamm Dam, the museum and art gallery in Charlottenburg, and the dramatic paintings of Schinkel and Caspar David Friedrich. Not all the cultural experiences involve legwork though. There are frequent stops to admire the stunning woodland scenery, interspersed with monuments and lakes. We are in the world capital of cafe culture here in Berlin, and the only difficulty is which of these establishments to choose to rest our weary bones. We are not talking cafes trapped in chains, like Nero or Costa Box. Each one has its own unique character. If you want to soak up the atmosphere and the caffeine, in a chandeliered ballroom, an artist's studio or a space-age module, Berlin in the 80s will be your cup of Arabica. It's also a great place to practice your passive smoking. The drinks and the decadent cream cakes may seem expensive, but it's a small price to pay for a seat on the set of Cabaret. I wish I could be as enthusiastic about day 2 of our visit. Stella is a remarkable young woman, a goth before her time. From an educational point of view, Her insistence on a German language guided tour of a major historic site is one I can hardly object to. The nearby concentration camp is not the one where my grandmother died. But you can understand my reluctance. The things we do for teaching, after that, all I want to do is to offer silent thanks to my mum's mum, whom I never met. A long hot shower and a comfortable bed beckon. Tomorrow, we will see real history in the making. I wouldn't miss it for the world. You must come too. Talk about tidings of comfort and joy.